The metallic tang on my tongue isn't from the cheap champagne they'll serve later. It's satisfaction, sharp and lingering. I stand at the altar, a carefully constructed smile on my face, watching the scene unfold. Sarah, my beautiful, beaming fiancé, is kissing another man. Not just any man. That's Jake, who, until 24 hours ago, was supposed to be my best man. Now he's her. Well, the program says man of honor, but we all know what that really means. A collective gasp ripples through the 150 guests packed into St. Michael's. Good. Let them gasp. Let them whisper. This, I announce, my voice carrying easily in the sudden, shocked silence, amplified by the discreet lapel mic I insisted on, was always the plan. Chaos erupts. My plan. My perfect, intricate, devastating plan. It all started properly, or rather unraveled properly, 48 hours ago. We were at the rehearsal dinner, a stuffy affair at some overpriced restaurant Sarah's mother had insisted upon. I remember the cloying scent of lilies, the way the gold-rimmed plates seemed to sneer at me. I was picking at my sea bass, trying to ignore the knot in my stomach that had been tightening for weeks when I saw it. Jake, my best friend since college, the guy who was supposed to stand by my side, was leaning into Emma, Sarah's maid of honor. His hand was on the small of her back, a little too low, a little too familiar. Emma, with her perpetually innocent blue eyes and a smile that could charm a snake, was giggling, her head tilted just so. It wasn't friendly banter. It was the kind of charged, predatory circling I'd seen 1,000 times in bars, but never expected to witness between my best man and my fiancé's chief attendant, not 2 days before my wedding. My fork clattered against the plate, a small, sharp sound that only I seemed to notice. My hands, hidden beneath the tablecloth, began to tremble. I watched them, a cold dread seeping into me. He said something, his voice a low murmur I couldn't catch over the general din of forced merriment. She laughed again, then subtly, or so she thought, passed him her phone. He tapped something into it, a smug little smirk playing on his lips before handing it back. Numbers exchanged, right there, in front of everyone yet hidden in plain sight. Later that night, back in the soullessly luxurious hotel suite Sarah and I were sharing, separately, of course, as per her tradition. I tried to talk to her. "Sarah," I began, keeping my voice even, "did you notice Jake and Emma tonight?" She was scrolling through Instagram, a face mask cracking around her lips. What about them? They seemed fine." "Fine, Sarah. He was all over her. They exchanged numbers. It looked intense." She finally looked up. Her eyes narrowed. "Marcus, don't start. You're being paranoid. They're just being friendly. It's a wedding. People get a bit flirty. God, you can be so controlling sometimes." Controlling. That was her favorite accusation whenever I questioned anything. Paranoid. My gut screamed otherwise. "I'm not trying to be controlling, Sarah. It just felt off. Disrespectful, even." She sighed dramatically, peeling off the mask. "Look, I've got enough to stress about without you inventing drama. Jake's your best friend. Emma's mine. Drop it." But I couldn't drop it. Her dismissal, the casual way she brushed off my legitimate concerns, it was like a splash of cold water. I went into the bathroom, my reflection looking back at me like a stranger. That's when I made the decision. If I was paranoid, I'd get proof. I took out my phone, checked the storage, and set it to record video whenever I could discreetly, quietly. A little power move just for myself. The next day, during the actual rehearsal at the church, the air was thick with unspoken things. Jake was still playing the role of devoted best man, clapping me on the back, cracking jokes. Emma was fluttering around Sarah, adjusting her imaginary veil, her eyes darting towards Jake every few minutes. I kept my phone angled, recording snippets. Later, reviewing the footage, I saw it clearly. The lingering glances, the brief touches that lasted a fraction too long, the shared smiles when they thought no one was looking. It was that evening, less than 24 hours before the wedding, that the mini cliffhanger of my burgeoning horror story arrived. Sarah was out with her bridesmaids for a last night of freedom dinner. I was supposed to be with Jake and the groomsmen, but I'd pleaded a migraine. I needed to think. I was scrolling through old photos, trying to remember a time when I trusted Jake, when a notification popped up on his laptop, which he'd carelessly left open on the desk in our shared groomsmen suite. A message preview from Emma. "Can't wait for tomorrow? Think he suspects anything?" My blood ran cold. I clicked. The message history went back months. Flirty texts, inside jokes, plans to catch up that were clearly more than friendly. My initial, shaky suspicion hardened into a sickening certainty. This wasn't just wedding day flirtation. This was a betrayal of a different magnitude. Driven by a desperate, nauseating need to know the full extent, I did something I'd never done before. I picked up Jake's phone. It was unlocked. His gallery. My breath hitched. There they were. Explicit photos. Emma, Jake. Posed, smiling, intimate. Photos taken in hotel rooms, in what looked like Jake's apartment. Dates stamped on them. The most recent one was from last week, when Jake had told me he was visiting his sick aunt. The metallic taste in my mouth intensified, but now it was bitter, like bile. This wasn't just a flirtation. This was an affair, a long-standing, calculated, gut-wrenching affair. And I was about to marry a woman whose maid of honor was sleeping with my best man. The sharp scent of industrial-strength cleaning products, the kind that unsuccessfully try to mask stale cigarette smoke and despair, filled my nostrils. I was sitting on the floor in the hotel hallway, Jake's phone clutched in my hand. The explicit images burned into my retinas. My world had just imploded. The carefully constructed narrative of my life, successful architect, loving fiancé, loyal best friend, was a smoking ruin. My first coherent thought was prenup. Sarah and I had one. A fairly standard one, or so I'd thought. I fumbled for my own phone, my fingers slick with sweat, and called Derek. He was an old college buddy, now a shark of a lawyer specializing in messy divorces. "Marcus, it's 2 a.m. Everything okay for the big day?" His voice was groggy. "Derek, I need you, now," I explained, the words tumbling out in a torrent of disbelief and rage. He listened, the silence on his end punctuated only by my ragged breathing. "The prenup, Marcus," he said finally, his voice now sharp and alert. "What are the infidelity clauses? And more importantly, what do you know about Sarah's financials, the ones her family presented?" My heart pounded a furious rhythm against my ribs as a plan, cold and sharp, began to take shape in the wreckage of my emotions. Revenge. It was an ugly word, but right then it was the only thing that made sense. Derek's questions about Sarah's family financials resonated. They'd made a show of contributing significantly to the wedding, a gesture that had seemed generous at the time. Now it felt like another piece of a puzzle I was only just beginning to assemble. The next few hours were a blur of frantic, whispered phone calls and clandestine research on my laptop. Derek got to work on the legal side, digging into the prenup's fine print. I focused on Sarah's family. It didn't take long to find the cracks. Public records, a few discreet inquiries with contacts I'd cultivated in the financial world. The picture that emerged was grim. Her father's supposedly thriving import-export business was leveraged to the hilt, teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. Their generous wedding contributions? Likely a desperate attempt to maintain appearances, or worse, to secure a connection to my perceived wealth. A bitter laugh escaped me. They thought they were playing me. My revenge needed a soundtrack. I remembered a conversation months ago. Jake and Emma humming a particular indie song, claiming it was their jam after discovering it at some obscure concert. With a few clicks, I accessed the wedding DJ's online portal and made a small, significant change to the reception playlist. Their song was now prominently featured. A quiet power move, a little knife twist just for them. The plan was solidifying, but I needed to lay the groundwork to make the unthinkable seem plausible. At breakfast with the wedding party, a strained, awkward affair, I casually mentioned an article I'd read about trendy weddings. Apparently, I said, buttering a croissant with a steady hand I didn't feel, some couples are doing these wild role reversals for the wedding party. Like the bride has a best woman and the groom has a man of honor. All very progressive, shaking up traditions. I saw Jake and Emma exchange a quick, almost imperceptible glance. Sarah's mother, bless her oblivious snobbery, sniffed. Sounds utterly ridiculous. Traditions are traditions for a reason, Marcus. Just something I read, Margaret, I said lightly. Seeds planted. Later that day, during a chaotic final walkthrough of the reception venue, Margaret, Sarah's mother, cornered me. She was flustered, her perfectly coiffed hair slightly askew. Marcus, dear, she began, her voice a little too bright. About Jake and Emma. Sarah told me you were a bit concerned. I just wanted to reassure you they're just high-spirited. Young people, you know. She patted my arm. Nothing to worry your handsome head about. My internal alarm bells shrieked. Sarah had told her? And this was her reassurance? It was a confirmation cloaked in condescension. She knew. Or at least she suspected enough to try and smooth things over. The mini cliffhanger of her complicity. It added another layer to their deceit. The rehearsal dinner that evening. The same restaurant. The same cloying lilies. This time, though, I wasn't the one picking at my food. I was watching, observing, a predator waiting for the right moment. The champagne glasses clinked, a hollow, cheerful sound that grated on my nerves. Speeches were made, full of saccharine platitudes and blatant lies about enduring love and loyalty. Jake's speech, in particular, was a masterpiece of hypocrisy, lauding our unbreakable brotherhood. I almost choked on my water. Then it was my turn. I stood up, tapping my glass for attention. A hush fell over the room. Thank you all for being here, I began, my voice smooth, betraying none of the turmoil within. Sarah, my beautiful bride-to-be. I smiled at her, a smile that didn't reach my eyes. And to our wonderful wedding party. Jake, Emma, you've both been such incredible support. I paused, letting the anticipation build. In fact, your connection has been so inspiring to witness. I looked directly at them, a flicker of unease in their eyes. So, I've decided to make a little change to the lineup for tomorrow. A surprise, really? To honor that special bond. The air crackled. Emma, I said, my gaze locking with hers. I'd be honored if you would be my best man. A stunned silence. Emma's face went pale. And Jake, I turned to him, his smugness evaporating. Sarah would be thrilled to have you as her maid of honor. Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Her eyes, wide with panic, darted from me to Jake, then to Emma. She opened her mouth to object, then closed it again. What could she say? How could she possibly protest without revealing the sordid truth that bound them all together? The section cliffhanger was perfect. She was trapped. They were all trapped. And the real performance was about to begin. The wedding morning, I sat by the window of my suite, sipping black coffee, enjoying the sunrise. It was going to be a beautiful day for a reckoning. My phone, which had been strategically placed in the bridal suite the night before. A little gift of a portable charger I knew Sarah would use, had already relayed the sounds of chaos. Raised voices, panicked whispers, the distinct thud of something being thrown. Music to my ears. Just as I was finishing my second cup, there was a furious pounding on my door. I opened it to find Emma, her face flushed, eyes wild with a panic that was immensely satisfying to behold. She wasn't in her periwinkle bridesmaid dress. She was in a silk robe, her hair a mess. "Marcus, what the hell do you think you're doing?" she hissed, storming into the room. "Good morning, Emma. Or should I say best man Emma?" I replied, taking another calm sip of coffee. "This isn't funny. You have to call it off. This role switch, it's insane." "Is it? I thought it was rather fitting. A tribute to your close relationship with Jake." Her composure, already frayed, snapped. "Close relationship? What are you implying?" "Oh, I don't think I need to imply anything, Emma. Your text messages to Jake are quite explicit, as are the photos." The color drained from her face. Her desperate gaze darted around the room, as if seeking an escape route. Then her expression shifted, becoming calculating, almost predatory. She moved closer, her voice dropping to a husky whisper. "Marcus, look. Maybe we all got a little carried away. Wedding nerves, you know? But this can be fixed. We can fix this." She placed a hand on my arm, her fingers surprisingly strong. The texture of her silk robe against my skin felt wrong, invasive. Her eyes, usually so wide and innocent, now held a desperate gleam. What if I made it worth your while to forget all this? To just let things go back to how they were supposed to be? Her hand slid higher up my arm. The implication was clear. Bribery with a side of seduction. Pathetic. And all dutifully recorded by the small, discreet camera on my laptop, which I'd positioned perfectly. "Emma," I said, my voice dangerously soft. "Are you trying to bribe me? Or perhaps seduce me just hours before my wedding to your best friend?" She flinched as if struck. Before she could answer, the door burst open again. This time it was Jake, his face a mask of fury. He was, to my immense satisfaction, holding a frilly periwinkle dress, clearly the maid of honor attire, as if it were a venomous snake. "Marcus, what is the meaning of this? Makeup? A dress? Are you out of your mind?" "Not at all, Jake. Or should I say maid of honor, Jake. Just ensuring you're appropriately attired for your important role." I gestured to Emma. "Your fellow attendant here was just explaining how this is all a misunderstanding." Jake's eyes narrowed, darting between me and a now crumpled Emma. "What have you told him?" he snarled at her. "It doesn't matter what she's told me, Jake," I said, my voice hardening. I know about the affair. The months of sneaking around, the photos." A beat of silence, thick and suffocating. Emma looked like she was about to be sick. Jake's bravado deflated, replaced by a dawning horror. "But don't worry," I continued, a cruel smile playing on my lips. "I'm not going to stop you. In fact, I'm helping you. I'm giving you exactly what you both clearly want. Each other." The mini cliffhanger of their dawning comprehension was delicious. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a wedding to get to, my wedding, and you both have roles to play." The ceremony began. The organ music swelled, a triumphant traditional sound that felt utterly incongruous with the simmering tension in the church. Guests craned their necks, whispering, their faces a mixture of confusion and morbid curiosity as Emma, looking stiff and uncomfortable in a hastily altered tuxedo, walked down the aisle, followed by Jake, a vision of humiliated fury in the periwinkle dress, his face caked in poorly applied makeup by a snickering bridesmaid I'd subtly encouraged. The sound of nervous laughter rippled through the congregation. Sarah, when she finally appeared at the back of the church on her father's arm, looked like a ghost. Her usually vibrant complexion was ashen, her smile a painted-on rictus of terror. Her hands, clutching her bouquet, were visibly shaking. She knew I was in control. As she reached the altar, her eyes met mine. There was no love there, only fear. Good. I saw Derek in the front pew, a reassuringly grim expression on his face, a leather briefcase resting by his feet. He gave me a subtle nod. The quiet power move of having divorce papers ready, front and center. The officiant, a kindly old man blissfully unaware of the melodrama unfolding before him, began his well-worn speech about love and commitment. It was all I could do not to laugh. Finally, we reached the pivotal moment. If anyone here knows any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, the officiant intoned, his voice resonating through the suddenly silent church, let them speak now, or forever hold their peace. My gaze flicked to Derek. I gave him the slightest of nods. This was it. The trap was sprung. Derek stood, the leather of his briefcase creaking ominously in the silence. Every head in the church swiveled towards him. Actually, Reverend. Derek's voice was calm, authoritative, cutting through the tension like a knife. There is a matter that needs to be addressed. I have evidence of significant financial misrepresentation and potential fraud concerning the prenuptial agreement signed by Miss Sarah Carmichael and Mr. Marcus Thorne. A gasp, louder this time, collective and sharp. Sarah's face, already pale, drained of all remaining color. She looked like she might faint. Her father, standing beside her, stiffened, his jovial facade crumbling. This is an outrage, Sarah's father blustered, his voice too loud, too defensive. What is the meaning of this interruption? The meaning, Mr. Carmichael, I said, stepping forward, my voice ringing with a clarity I hadn't felt in months, is that the game is up. I turned to the stunned congregation. Many of you know that Sarah's family generously offered to contribute to this wedding. What you may not know is that the Carmichael family business is, in fact, on the verge of bankruptcy. This entire wedding, this rush to the altar, wasn't about love. It was about securing access to my assets, a lifeline for a sinking ship. The echo of gasps reverberated through the church. It was a symphony of shock. And Jake and Emma, I continued, gesturing towards my erstwhile best man and maid of honor, who were now looking like trapped animals. They weren't just having a sordid affair, they were co-conspirators, recruited by Mr. Carmichael to get close to me, to gather information, to ensure this union went ahead smoothly so they could all benefit from the eventual planned divorce and carve up what they believed to be my considerable fortune. Emma whimpered. Jake looked murderous, but impotent in his periwinkle prison. You see, I said, allowing a predatory smile, I've been aware of their activities for some time, and I've been feeding them information. Carefully curated information about my finances, specifically about a certain secret offshore account bursting with millions. I paused, letting that sink in. The account they were so eager to get their hands on, the one they've been whispering about, planning how to divide, it's real. I set it up myself a few weeks ago. Another pause. It's also completely empty. A decoy. The silence that followed was profound. Then Sarah made a move. A desperate, clumsy lunge towards the side aisle, her expensive gown tangling around her legs. Not so fast, Sarah, I said calmly. Two large, impeccably dressed men, friends of mine from a rather specialized security firm, stepped forward, blocking her exit. the mini cliffhanger of her failed escape. The sharp crack of Sarah's heels on the marble floor echoed as she stumbled, her dreams of escape and my money shattering around her. Jake, finally snapping, let out a roar and lunged at me. It was a pathetic attempt. He tripped over the voluminous train of his maid of honor dress, sprawling gracelessly at my feet. The congregation, now fully gripped by the unfolding drama, gasped anew. And as for my real net worth, I continued, stepping disdainfully over Jake's prone form, the wealth you were all so keen to acquire? It's safely tucked away in a network of overseas accounts you never even knew existed. Accounts that are remarkably well protected. At this, Emma finally broke. Sobs racked her body. "It wasn't my idea!" she shrieked, tears streaming down her face, ruining her meticulously applied makeup. "It was him! Mr. Carmichael, he made us do it! He promised us a cut! I can tell you everything!" She was desperate to save herself, willing to throw anyone and everyone under the bus. Her confession, loud and clear, for everyone to hear. I looked at the crumbling facade of the Carmichael family, at the humiliated forms of Jake and Emma, at the shocked faces of our guests. The truth was a harsh, unforgiving light. "Oh, there's still one more surprise," I said, my voice soft, but carrying a deadly weight. "Something none of you accounted for." The air in the church grew colder, heavier. They thought it was over. They had no idea. The click of handcuffs. It's a small sound, but in the cavernous, stunned silence of St. Michael's, it echoed like a gunshot. 2 men and a woman, dressed in sober business suits that screamed, "Federal Agent," were suddenly flanking the altar. They hadn't been there moments before. How had they— "Marcus Thorne," the woman said, her voice calm but carrying an undeniable authority, "has been cooperating with the FBI's white-collar crime division for the past 6 months." A new wave of gasps, more subdued this time, tinged with disbelief and a dawning understanding of just how deep this rabbit hole went. "The Carmichael import-export business," she continued, her gaze sweeping over Sarah's now ashen-faced parents, "is under investigation for multiple counts of wire fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering." Sarah's mother let out a small, strangled cry and swayed, her husband barely catching her before she collapsed onto the plush velvet of the front pew. The scope of the investigation, laid bare in the house of God. It was beautifully ironic. "Jake Costello and Emma Davies, Agent Rodriguez." I'd learned her name during our many clandestine meetings, went on, her eyes fixing on the disgraced pair. "Were not just adulterers. They were actively recruited by Mr. Alistair Carmichael. Their mission? To seduce, spy, and gather financial intelligence on Mr. Thorne, who they believed to be a wealthy but naive investor ripe for the picking. The quiet power move wasn't just my fake bank account. It was the steady stream of carefully selected, misleading information I'd been feeding to the FBI, painting a target on the Carmichaels they couldn't ignore, all while appearing to be the gullible fiancé. This wedding, this whole charade, wasn't just my personal revenge. It was a meticulously planned sting operation designed to bring every player in their corrupt little enterprise together in one convenient, easily contained location. "We have recordings," Agent Rodriguez stated, her voice devoid of emotion. The mini cliffhanger landed with the force of a physical blow. "Of conversations, meetings, text messages, everything." The metallic smell of fear sweat, sharp and acrid, began to permeate the sanctified air of the church. It was coming from Jake, from Emma, from Mr. Carmichael. Jake, true to his cowardly nature, cracked first. "I'll cooperate," he blurted out, stumbling to his feet, the periwinkle dress twisted awkwardly around his legs. "I'll tell you everything. It was Carmichael's idea, all of it. I needed the money." His confession. a desperate bid to reduce his inevitable sentence. Emma, seeing Jake's betrayal, tried another angle. "They forced me!" she cried, her voice shrill. "I was coerced. I was scared of them." "Your recorded confession to Mr. Thorne this morning, Miss Davies," Agent Rodriguez said dryly, "in which you attempted to bribe and seduce him into silence, suggests otherwise." Checkmate? Then, the pièce de résistance. The moment I'd been waiting for. The culmination of months of living a lie. "You see," I said, addressing the bewildered congregation, my voice resonating with a newfound strength. "My wealthy investor persona, the slightly clueless, easily manipulated fiancé, that was the cover. My real job." I reached into my jacket, my fingers closing around the cool, reassuring metal. I pulled it out, flipping it open to display the gleaming gold shield. The weight of my real FBI badge felt substantial, grounding. "Special Agent Marcus Thorne, Financial Crimes. This entire engagement, this wedding, has been an undercover operation from the start." A stunned, absolute silence. Even the agents looked momentarily surprised. I hadn't told them I was going to do that. Sarah stared at me, her face a mask of disbelief, hatred, and a dawning, horrifying comprehension. She opened her mouth, perhaps for one last desperate play, one final, futile attempt at manipulation. Sarah's voice, when it came, was a tremulous whisper, yet it carried in the supercharged silence of the church. "Marcus, I loved you." Her eyes, those deceptive pools of sapphire, welled with tears. Crocodile tears, I knew, but they were convincing. "My family, they're complicated. They pressured me, I was trapped, but my feelings for you, they were real." A commendable performance. Almost believable, if I hadn't known the truth. My jaw tightened. For a split second, an old, familiar ache echoed in my chest, a phantom limb of what I'd thought we had. I ruthlessly suppressed it. "Were they, Sarah?" I asked, my voice soft, dangerous. I pulled out my phone, the one that had captured so much of their deceit, a few taps. Then, Sarah's voice, bright and brittle, filled the church. It was a recording from her bachelorette party, a snippet captured by a bugged party favor I'd gifted one of her more talkative, less loyal bridesmaids. "Oh, Marcus? He's sweet, I guess. A bit boring, if I'm honest. But loaded. And so wonderfully naive. The Mark. That's what Daddy calls him. Honestly, once we're married and the finances are merged, it'll be smooth sailing. Jake thinks so too. And Emma's been invaluable in keeping him distracted." Her laughter, light and cruel, echoed off the stained glass windows. The silence that followed was absolute, heavier than any before. Her lies, her carefully constructed victim narrative, crumbled to dust, exposed by her own words. The sensory anchor of that crushing silence was my vindication. "I documented everything, Sarah," I said, my voice flat. "Your real feelings, your family's plans, Jake and Emma's willing participation." This was my quiet power move, the culmination of months of meticulous evidence gathering. The prenup we all made such a fuss about, it was a fabrication, deliberately flawed. We were never legally engaged in a way that would have protected your interests in my real assets, because the entire engagement was predicated on fraud. This wedding was never meant to be real. It was a stage set to catch you all. Just then, the heavy oak doors at the back of the church creaked open. Mr. Carmichael, Sarah's father, who had mysteriously disappeared from the front pew during Agent Rodriguez's initial revelations, was being escorted back in by 2 more FBI agents. The mini cliffhanger of his futile escape attempt played out for all to see. He looked deflated, aged a decade in the last 10 minutes, The congregation, which had been a sea of shocked but relatively still faces, finally erupted. Not in anger, but in a cacophony of whispers, exclamations, and the distinct, rapid-fire clicking of camera phones, the sensory anchor of a scandal going viral in real time. This story would be everywhere by nightfall. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, raising my voice above the growing din, "I apologize for the unconventional nature of today's events. You came expecting a wedding. Instead, you've witnessed the culmination of a 6-month federal investigation into financial fraud and racketeering. Jake and Emma, looking utterly broken, were formally arrested, their Miranda rights read in clipped professional tones. The periwinkle dress and ill-fitting tuxedo suddenly seemed even more pathetically absurd under the cold, hard light of federal charges. Conspiracy, fraud. Their affair was the least of their crimes now. Sarah, no longer crying, just stared blankly ahead as agents gently but firmly cuffed her hands behind her back. Her parents were similarly detained, racketeering. It was a heavy charge. Their carefully constructed empire of lies was imploding. "The considerable expenses for today's event," I continued, a grim satisfaction settling deep in my bones, "will be donated in their entirety to a charity supporting victims of financial fraud." Another quiet power move, turning their greed into a force for good. The church began to empty, the guests shuffling out in a daze, their voices hushed, their eyes wide. The sensory anchor of that slow, echoing exodus, the whispers and the clicking phones marked the end of the charade. Derek clapped me on the shoulder. "You did it, Marcus. You actually did it." I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for 6 months, free, finally, unbelievably, free from the nightmare. I walked out of St. Michael's with Derek, blinking in the bright afternoon sun, leaving the wreckage of the Carmichael dynasty behind me. But it wasn't quite over. There was still the trial. 6 months later, the courtroom was predictably drab, all polished wood and muted colors, a stark contrast to the opulent lie of the wedding. The scratch of the court reporter's stenotype machine was a constant rhythmic whisper, the only sound apart from the rustle of papers and the occasional cough. This was my sensory anchor now, the sound of due process. I was on the stand, the prosecution's star witness. I recounted the meticulously documented deception, my voice even professional. Sarah sat at the defendant's table, flanked by her expensive lawyer. Her eyes, when they met mine, blazed with a pure, unadulterated hatred. The demure, loving fiancé was gone, replaced by a woman stripped of her pretenses, realizing just how thoroughly and comprehensively she had lost. That was an emotion-rich action I'd replay in my mind for a long time. Jake, looking gaunt and defeated, had already made a deal. He got 5 years, his testimony against the Carmichaels buying him a slightly reduced sentence. Emma, ever the opportunist, had cooperated even more extensively. Her tearful confessions and detailed accounts of the Carmichael conspiracy earned her 3 years, with a possibility of early parole. She'd sung like a canary, throwing everyone, especially Sarah, under the bus to save her own skin. The Carmichael family empire, built on decades of deceit and shady dealings, crumbled under the weight of the evidence. Assets were seized, accounts frozen. Sarah's father, the patriarch of their corrupt dynasty, received a sentence that would ensure he'd spend his remaining healthy years behind bars. Her mother got a lesser, but still significant term for her complicity. My quiet power move was simply telling the unvarnished truth, backed by irrefutable evidence. The prosecution, with Derek assisting, laid out the intricate web of fraud. My real identity as an FBI financial crime specialist was officially revealed during the trial, adding another layer of humiliation for the defendants. They hadn't just been duped by a wealthy mark. They'd been outmaneuvered by federal law enforcement. The satisfying thud of the gavel as each sentence was announced was the true sensory anchor of justice served. After my final testimony, as I was leaving the courthouse, a woman approached me. "Special Agent Thorne?" I turned. She was tall, with intelligent, kind eyes and a no-nonsense haircut. Agent Rebecca Davies, from the Asset Forfeiture Division. We'd worked peripherally on the case, but never met formally. "Rebecca," I said, managing a small smile. "Good to finally put a face to the name." "You too." "That was quite a performance in there, and before the wedding." A hint of amusement touched her lips. "Just doing my job," I said, though we both knew it had been more than that. "Coffee?" she asked. "To celebrate a win?" My heart, a muscle I'd thought bruised beyond feeling, gave a surprising little lift, an emotion-rich action that caught me off guard. I'd like that. 1 year later. The salty tang of the ocean air, the gentle sound of waves whispering against the shore, these were the sensory anchors of this day. No grand church, no hundreds of guests. Just a handful of close friends, real friends, and family on a secluded beach in Maui. Rebecca stood before me, her eyes shining, her smile genuine and breathtaking. Our wedding. Small, authentic, and utterly real. Our song. A quiet, acoustic melody played softly in the background. A few weeks before, a letter had arrived, forwarded from my old address. Prison stationery. From Emma. I'd almost thrown it away, but curiosity, a lingering speck of some unidentifiable emotion, had made me open it. "Marcus," it began, her handwriting surprisingly neat. "I know you'll probably never read this, or if you do, you'll burn it. I deserve that. I just wanted to say, thank you. You showed me who I really was, who I had become. And as much as I hate what happened, I'm trying to, I don't know, be better. Maybe one day I will be." There was more, but I didn't read it. I didn't need to. I walked to the fireplace in the small beach house Rebecca and I were renting and dropped the letter onto the dying embers of last night's fire. The paper curled, blackened, and then with a final, satisfying whoosh, turned to ash. Some people might find redemption. Some might even deserve it. But her journey wasn't mine to witness or validate. I turned back to Rebecca, who was watching me with that knowing, gentle smile. She held out her hand. I took it. As we danced on the sand, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I felt a lightness I hadn't thought possible. This was my song now, our song, and I was finally, completely, wonderfully free.